Okay, here's a QuickTime video for a sequence detector problem. Okay, in this problem we have an input signal X and an output variable Z, and we're trying to detect, coming in on the serial line, the input sequence 0, 1, 1, 0. Alright, in the first case we're not going to allow, or we're not going to try to detect overlapping sequences. Okay, so let me put a grid up here. All right, so we're going to try to do a state diagram that solves this problem, and initially we're going to start with the 0 state, where there's no progress towards the sequence. Okay, and then we know what's going to happen. If we get x equals 0, we will now have 1 correct towards the sequence. Okay, on the other hand, if we get another 1, since the sequence starts with 0 up here, you can see, then if we get another 1, we just loop back to the original 0 correct state. Okay, so when we're in 1 correct, we have 0, the first digit towards the sequence. All right, so that lets us go to the next state. Okay, and so the next state would be 2 correct towards the sequence. In that case, we'd have a 0 and a 1. Okay, so clearly, if I get a 1 for x, I now have both the 0 and the 1. If I get another 0, okay, so I'm 1 correct and I get another 0, looking at the sequence, I still only have 1, in this case, maybe this 0, 1 correct towards the sequence. Okay? So if I get another 0, I go back to the same state. Okay? So that takes care of state 1. Now state 2, if I get another another correct bit, I will then have 3 correct towards the sequence, and that would be 0, 1, 1. Okay, so if I get a 1, I have 3 correct. What happens if I get a 0? I'll look at that, and the original sequence starts with a 0, then there's a 1. So there's only 1 digit correct at that point. This 1 digit is correct. Okay, so on a 0, I should go back to 1 correct. Okay, and continuing in this way, let's put down 4. All right, so we have 4 correct towards the sequence. So we could write down what that would be. All right, so if I get another 1 from state 3, I go to the 4 correct state. Okay. All right, so if I have 3 correct and I get a 0, where do I go? Well, if I get a 0, looking at it, I only have 1 correct to the sequence, and so from 4, I would go back to state 1. Okay. Now finally, state 5. I have 5 correct. So to get 5 correct, I would need 0, 1, 1, 1, 0. Okay, so from 4 correct, if I got another 0, I'd be done. However, what happens on a 1? I'm sorry about the coughing. On a 1, if I get this extra 1 here, I look back at my original sequence, I have nothing correct. All right, so on a 1, this would go back to here to 0 correct. Okay, let me clean that up a little bit. All right, so next we have to answer the question, what happens from the 5 correct state? Okay, so let me move this a little bit. Okay. I'm at 5 correct, and I'm not going to try to detect overlapping sequences. All right, so let me ask the question, what happens if I get a 0? If I get a 0, and there's no overlapping sequences allowed, then the next 0 here is 1 correct towards the sequence. So that should go here. All right. Then what happens if I get a 1? Okay, so put down 1, look at this, go back and see, you know, we're not doing any overlapping sequences. So if I have 1 correct, that's not any progress towards the sequence. And so from the 1, if I get a 1 on the input, that would go to the 0 correct state. All right, so this takes care, this is the solution for part A. All right, so what we'd like to do next is take a look at how we would modify what we came up with in part A to look at the case where we're going to allow overlapping sequences. Okay, so this time overlapping sequences are to be detected. Okay, so let's cut this and copy it to the next page. Okay, so take all this. I'm going to copy it and move it down to a new spot where we can work on it. All right, so it turns out the fix for allowing an overlapping sequence is to change what happens from state 5. So let me delete everything from state 5. All right, if we have 5 correct, okay, this is harder to read now. If we have 5 correct, okay, what happens when we get a 0? All right, so looking at a 0, I would have 1 correct to the sequence. Just like before, actually. All right, so now what happens if at this point I get a 1? Since we're allowing an overlapping sequence, I take a look at this and I see a new sequence forming right here, 0, 1. That's the front end of our sequence. So if I got a 1, I now have 2 bits towards our sequence. And so we can snake that through here. On a 1, it should go here. right, so that's our solution to part B. Okay.